Hey, what's up guys? It's KELGORE here, back on the vlog, coming at you from my micro apartment. I'm currently weeding this little micro garden where I'm growing my vegan chicken tendies, as you can see. I was using a shoe to weed it because I'm doing this like no buy, low buy, sustainable fashion cold shower challenge, and we really need to think about our impact on the planet. You know, like your personal actions have a bigger impact than you might think. And it's not enough to just drive electric or buy a reusable water bottle, you know? We need to do more to reduce our impact footprint, mason jar of trash, reusable bicycle habits. You know what I mean? And as you know, we are working on hashtag Vision Zero Waste here on the vlog, and that's why I'm so happy to announce that I don't even poop anymore. I'm running at 100% efficiency, which is a good thing because I actually don't have a bathroom in my micro apartment, but that's a story for another day. I gotta go to work, but I am gonna check in with you guys tomorrow. Be sure to check back because by tomorrow morning, my new breed of plastic straw eating centipedes should have hatched, so fingers crossed that it works this time. KELGORE out. Well, time to go clock in at my job at the Nestle Corporation so I can pay rent to my landlord. When times get tough, austerity is often the prescription. You know, like when local governments cut school funding and social programs. But tough times also lead to an increase in personal austerity, wherein we tell people to pinch pennies and cut back on expenses and work harder. We are also told that austerity is the solution to our climate crisis. A lot of us are correct to share the innate sense that our overconsumption is bad for the planet, so we do our best to reduce, recycle, and reuse. We buy things that come in sustainable packaging. We buy less. We buy it for life. We vote with our dollar, and we put pressure on the top 100 companies that are responsible for 70% of global emissions. That's good, right? The problem is that even if you eliminated all of that overconsumption, if you stopped using cars and airplanes, if you lived off potatoes and green beans you grew in your own micro garden, if you thrifted the bare necessities and minimized your waste, you would still be left with your largest expenditure: rent. Before we begin, I feel like I need to address the elephant in the room. Well, technically it's a closet, but it could be used as an office or a nursery. But yeah, there are two very special groups of people that I need to address. They aren't very patient or thoughtful, so I really want to direct some attention towards them before they shit their pants in the comments section below. I'm, of course, speaking about landlords and climate change deniers. If you're a landlord watching this video, you need to change so that the climate doesn't have to. And no, this isn't just a problem you can have your handyman cover in white latex paint. And yes, I might make a couple Mao intensifies jokes, but the truth is I don't have a violent bone in my body. I've never even punched anybody. So I'm definitely not here to incite physical harm against your kind. Besides, I'm pretty sure that landlordicide is illegal. How convenient. That being said, I am a proponent of people taking collective action against their oppressors to ensure better conditions for themselves and others. After all, our sheer numbers are our only strength. Climate change deniers, I see you raising your hand, and I will get to you in a moment. The police care way more about landlords than they do about tenants, and even though you might feel personally attacked when you have to pay property taxes, you have to remember that becoming a landlord was a choice that you made. If you become a self-hating landlord by the end of this video, don't worry because I'm going to talk about some of the things that you could do to improve the world around you. Stick around, I think you're gonna love this video. Not really. Okay, climate change deniers, Jesus Christ, I told you I was gonna get to you in a minute, okay? What's the big hurry anyways? It's not like the world is ending. But seriously, I know that some of the people who click on this video don't even believe in climate change, or maybe they're just climate critical, you know, a little apocalypse curious. So for their sake, let me just say this. Even if you think that every single study about our impact on the planet is fake, industry-funded lies, even if you think that the weather is the exact same as it was 30 years ago, even if you think that sea levels aren't rising or that there won't be millions of climate refugees fleeing to your country in the coming decades, even if you don't believe any of that, you gotta admit that humans have an impact on the environment. I'm not a scientist, but I don't think you have to understand the mechanics of carbon dioxide production, or understand what the ozone layer is made of, or fucking magnets, how do they work, to understand that we create metric tons of garbage every day. Can you really, in good faith, say that humans haven't massively changed the face of the earth? Nature exists in this perfect equilibrium, and we are constantly disrupting it. So even if you don't believe in the impending climate apocalypse that we've been warned about for years, you gotta admit that the way that we pollute and consume and build and sprawl is not sustainable, right? Okay, I think that's enough attention paid to our extra special guests. Now back to the actual video. In this video, we are going to break down exactly the kind of harm that landlords do, how they've caused more problems than you might think, how they impact our climate and overconsumption, and how American imperialism is kind of just one big mecha landlord. And really, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to get people to think critically about land ownership and how it factors into our economy and how it impacts the planet. Only 38% of owner-occupied homes in America are completely paid off. This means that 62% of so-called homeowners, plus the lucky class of renters, are paying monthly to live indoors. A large portion of their income goes to somebody else, be it a landlord or a bank, and the way in which they earn that money feeds back into the cycle of overconsumption. While you may not consume your home the way you consume food, you are coerced into working just to keep paying for it. The commodification of land means that shelter is no longer just shelter, it's capital. The difference between buying a home and renting one is that renters will never get that money back in any form. However, people who buy a home and then have to keep working just to make those monthly mortgage payments have a similar impact on the economy, in my opinion. After all, if they stop working and stop paying the bank, they will be forced out of that home. But buying a home for yourself is definitely not as insidious as buying multiple homes to rent out to others. Even though I hate our system of finance-based home ownership, I do understand that everybody's gotta live somewhere. So homeowners, I hope you don't feel overly attacked by this video, but I do think there are still some important points for you to consider because, after all, buying a home is like a gateway drug to becoming a landlord. It's when people begin to buy multiple pieces of land or multiple dwellings, etc., that things begin to get much worse. First of all, by doing this, by becoming a landlord, they are automatically reducing the number of affordable homes on the market. And no matter what your politics are, it's pretty hard to deny that housing just costs more now than it did 30 or 50 years ago, even when you adjust for inflation. So now, instead of the average family being able to save up and buy a modest home, you have to have two high-earning college graduates in their late 30s waiting to have kids so they can save up and buy a 1,000 square foot condo that some boomer couple bought in 1981 for $200. Meanwhile, the number of renters has also gone up. No surprise that when the economy shit the bed in 2009, a bunch of bastards went up and bought up all the foreclosed housing and started renting it out to vulnerable people. And when housing prices began to recover, rent went up too, essentially trapping people in a cycle of paying rent instead of ever being able to save up and purchase a home. Now, the cost of buying a home is way above those 2005 highs, and the possibility of ever buying has left the minds of most young people. Why has the cost of shelter gone up so much, even relative to inflation? Is it because minimum wage went up $3? Maybe it has something to do with the fact that landowners expect massive returns on their homes. Because they aren't just homes, they're investments. But where does that increased value come from? Who pays for it? If your home is worth $100,000 more now than when you bought it in 2004, where did that $100,000 come from? Did the land really get more valuable? It's just dirt. Did the house really go up in value? It's actually older and more run down now. Why is it going up in value? Who pays for the increase in value? Okay, so let's say a landlord or entity buys their first rental property. Here's two scenarios. In the first scenario, let's imagine that the family renting the house just covers the costs of the mortgage, taxes, maintenance, and insurance, and there's no monthly profit for the landlord. Even if that's the case, the landlord expects that in 10, 20, 30 years, that mortgage will have been paid off by those renters. Not only that, but they expect, and in fact feel entitled to being able to sell that home for much more than they bought it for doing nothing. The family or families that paid off that mortgage move out like it never frickin' happened, and the landlord gets back every dollar that they paid into it, and then some. And every single one of those dollars was earned doing soul-crushing, status quo enforcing, climate-destroying work. Here's the second scenario. The family pays the landlord and covers the cost of the mortgage, taxes, maintenance, and insurance, plus the landlord hikes up the rent a little bit and makes an extra $500 a month for themselves, a little passive income. Or maybe the landlord inherited the building in 1990 and it was already completely paid off. Now the landlord is charging the family an average market price for the unit, even though they barely have any costs associated with doing so. And if they live somewhere like California, it means they barely have to pay property taxes on it because they inherited it. Yeah, thanks Prop 13. Because of that, they will now pay the same taxes, property taxes, their father would have paid in 1976. 1976, the same year you could go see Rocky in theaters for $2. Your landlord pays jack shit, okay? The fucking audacity to then complain about property taxes. You are a bunch of fucking ghouls. So yes, your landlord might be doing absolutely nothing to cover the cost of their investment, or they might be doing absolutely nothing to profit wildly from a long paid off unit, which they haven't updated once unless the city literally forced them to do so. And someday, if they get tired of that doing nothing grind, they could just sell it for, I don't know, $1 million, $7 million. Why are you even asking? You can't afford it, you fucking plebe. Meanwhile, you're going to give your landlord a $2,000 security deposit. And in 6 years, after paying them a cumulative $150,000 in rent over the years, they're going to tell you you're actually not getting that security deposit back because the cords on the mini blinds were so tangled that they're going to have to be replaced. To think you could have been punching free holes in the fucking drywall this entire fucking time. Go ahead. Get your calculator out. Figure out how much rent you've paid to your landlord for all time. All your landlords. Now divide that by the hourly amount you usually make at your stupid fucking job. Do it. What's the number? I want to know the number. How many hours of your precious and finite existence have you given away to your fucking landlord? It's almost as though the medieval tradition of living on the land of a lord in return for your continuous labor never really ended. It's almost like indentured fucking servitude or something, only now with more alienation. So now that we've thoroughly defined what a landlord is, let's talk about the second element of this video. The part where we abuse the earth so badly that she murders us. It's sort of a Goodbye Earl situation, except humans are Earl and the earth is Wanda, and you have to decide whether or not you want to be like Marianne. Rent is regenerative, meaning it comes back again and again, right? And it forces us to earn money constantly, usually at redundant jobs in wasteful industries. Think about it for a minute. If your job just kind of disappeared, would that have a positive or negative impact on Mother Nature? If the entire industry you work in ceased to exist, would that mean less pollution overall? Of course, it's not going to be the case for every industry, but I think you get my point that a lot of industries are super wasteful and kind of fucking pointless. However, whether or not it benefits the earth does not matter. I mean, what matters is that your company keeps making money, right? And unfortunately, since your rent is due at the end of every month, you have to keep making money too. Rent is like T-1000. You shoot him several hundred times and might give you a little head start, but before you know it, he's behind you again and his hands are giant letter openers. Anyways, it's been 30 days. Rent is due again. I think you get my point. Since rent never goes away, you can never truly pay it down or get a return on it, and it forces you into this cycle of continuous labor and consumption. In his famous essay, In Praise of Idleness, Bertrand Russell argues that being idle or working less is a good thing. He isn't hung up on this puritanical idea that work brings honor and nobility to man in the eyes of God. He believes everyone should spend their time more freely, playing and thinking and enjoying life. However, he makes an exception for landlords. He states that it is only because of the hard work of others that landlords can remain idle. Perhaps this is what renters mean when they call their landlord a parasite. Idleness for the lucky few who own capital is not our solution, and no amount of effective altruism or entrepreneurship is going to save the planet now. By the way, effective altruism is the idea that, if I just become super wealthy, then I can donate so much money. Reducing your personal consumption also falls short. Arguments about personal responsibility and climate change often border on Malthusian, and it places way too much blame on people who barely even have control of their conditions, like people in developing nations. Yet personal responsibility has been platformed as a leading solution to climate change for years. Like how BP lets you log onto their website and calculate your own carbon footprint, despite the fact that they're B-fucking-P. I want to be clear that I don't bring up climate change to be alarmist or defeatist, but the fact is that since our industrialization, we have created an exponential amount of waste that we dump back into our environment. Amazing scientific discoveries like plastic and refrigeration and electricity have advanced us in ways that people a couple hundred years ago would not have been able to imagine. However, many of those amazing advancements require us to constantly mine for finite natural resources, and meanwhile, temperatures are rising. I do believe that consumerism is generally bad. And I do want everyone to take more personal and collective action against climate change. But none of your personal actions will matter unless we begin to unravel how land ownership created climate change in the first place. People attribute climate change to many different things, and it is a very complex scientific and political issue. Consumerism is usually the first talking point, which is convenient as it allows corporations and politicians to sell you back a solution. They unironically suggest carbon taxes and new infrastructure and greenwash products and cars that use 12% less gas and upcycled plastics and a million other false solutions that boil down to buy new shit. And even when millions of us reduce personal consumption, it doesn't necessarily mean that things will change. If production were led by market demand, it might make a difference, meaning if everyone wanted cow's milk, then the dairy industry would ramp up production. But if a lot of people switched to plant milks, the dairy industry would slow down production, right? Well, unfortunately, that's not how it works. As shown here, there are countless articles in the media about failing dairy farms in America, but many of them bury the lead that despite the drop in milk consumption, dairy farmers are continuing to increase production year after year. So even when you switch to climate-friendly alternatives, that personal choice, many products will just be manufactured anyway, and when nobody wants them, they just market them more aggressively, or they pour it down the drain, or they sell the surplus to the US government. This is how industries become so bloated in an effort to perpetually increase their valuation and the GDP of America at unrealistic levels. Corporations really do feel entitled to perpetual growth, and they're willing to do anything to prove those numbers on paper. And oftentimes, the neoliberal US government helps these corporations with that goal with tax breaks and subsidies and bailouts. So why give those companies bailouts? Well, they say it's for job creation. And why is job creation so important? Because if we don't have jobs, then we can't uphold the non-stop consumerism that our economy depends on. And if you don't have that stupid, unnecessary job, you cannot pay rent, and then the owning class might feel slightly uncomfortable, and we simply cannot have that. Another huge contributor to climate change is the destructive nature of the US military, but this one isn't mentioned nearly as often in Levi's commercials and by centrist Democrats. And yes, attributing climate change partially to the military-industrial complex is accurate. Don't worry, I'm not going to sit here and say that landlords dump more toxic sludge into the ocean than Uncle Sam does. The military could be used as a force to fight the impacts of climate change, or at least to provide aid, to countries wiped out by mega hurricanes and tidal waves, but they don't, and they won't. So what does the military do? Well, when they're not busy losing every war, they defend our lands, they expand our borders, they do imperialism all over the globe, they kill innocent people, and they protect American investments like oil. Well, what is imperialism if not the pinnacle of land ownership? We always think of imperialism as something an empire does to other countries abroad, but imperialism happens right here at home, too. I think this is something that we Americans often forget, and while we do benefit greatly from the suffering of those that the US colonizes, we are also being colonized all the time. The average US citizen is also colonized. You really think you're exempt from that shit? But think about that idea of buying a home, of buying land, of winning land in a war. It's land, it's dirt, it's the crust of the earth. How can one own it, right? How can one set up an imaginary border and say, this is mine? Can't someone just come and take it away from you then? Well, that's why we have the army, and that's why we have a police force designed to protect the private property of land-owning citizens. And if you don't believe that that's what the police are for, you are sadly misguided. Stop paying your rent or stop paying your mortgage and see what happens to you. So if the police exist to protect private property, and paying to stay on that private property is what drives us to labor endlessly, then aren't the police also the force driving us to work? It reminds me of those signs that say no loitering. Like, that's a real thing you can get in trouble for in this country. Just loitering. Chilling. The police are sort of like those vassals that the feudal lords would hire to keep the peasants in line, for a slightly higher social status. It really sucks. And in case it wasn't taught to you this way in school, land ownership is exactly how the US government stole huge amounts of Native American land with the help of its armies, including the Union Army. So they told the pioneers, God wants you to move west and help America expand its borders. And if you go claim land, like for free, go claim land, and if you can defend it against the Indians, then eventually the US will come incorporate that land you're on into the greater United States. So literally, by telling people that they'll own small bits of land, the US was able to expand its border and do a genocide against the rightful inhabitants of the place we call the continental US. Land ownership is imperialism, and anyone who tells you different is a fucking liar, or they've been indoctrinated by hundreds of years of historical revisionism. Bankers, Wall Street, insurance companies, corporations, and the US government all benefit greatly from the buying, selling, and financing of land. Land that doesn't belong to them, and we spend so much on our military because we know that land is valuable, and we need the biggest military on earth to make sure that no one ever takes it from us. And how could the war machine keep churning if we all stopped working and paying our bills? If we stopped grinding in the US, how would we maintain all of that imperialism abroad? It makes you think. Forgive me for being brief about the impacts of the US military, but this video is going to be 10 hours long if I keep going on that topic. The purpose of this video is to point out that owning land, especially more land than you need, is contributing to these cycles of consumption and waste. And when you hear Bill Gates speak about his little tech innovations that are going to save the world and all about climate change, remember that he owns more American farmland than anyone. And he considers them to be an investment. Tech billionaires aren't just tech billionaires. They rely heavily on buying up pieces of the earth and claiming ownership over them. An amalgamation of capital. My best Charlie Utter. Meanwhile, despite our decline, we are constantly ramping things up. Like, think about the company that you work for. Despite climate change, despite the pandemic, What are their goals for like 2021, 2022? Are they increasing the budget? Are they increasing their sales goal? Are they increasing prices? Are they trying to ramp up, distribution and production? Of course they are, because they have to constantly grow the business. They have to constantly pay their employees, and a huge portion of those salaries will go to rent. Anyone who pretends like increased production isn't contributing to emissions is being dishonest. Of course, we can't all just stop working. Even during the pandemic, they either made people continue working or they subsidized the people who couldn't work with unemployment, and they subsidized the businesses with PPP money so that they could keep growing. I got money from unemployment, and almost all of it went to my landlord, which is maybe one of my biggest regrets in life, because it wasn't until about August 2021 that I found out rent relief in California was rolling out retroactively, but it was too late. She already had my money. Of course, we need our trash collectors to keep collecting trash. We need skilled laborers to fix things. We need caregivers to keep us healthy. I could go on and on with, important jobs like these, but for every necessary worker, there are 10 people doing pointless, often harmful work just so they can keep paying their bills, and so some guy at the top of the company can keep stealing the value of their labor. Everyone I know is just trying to keep their head above water and keep food on the table and maintain their lifestyle if they can. But until the cost of living goes down for everyone, we will never be able to reduce consumption and wastefulness in any meaningful way. If your rent was lower and you could work a little less, and if you could commute a little less, and therefore you consume a little less, imagine how much of an impact that would have compared to buying a reusable fucking water bottle. Think of it on a global scale too. Work used to be a solution to a problem, and now work is a compulsory activity that we have to participate in just for the right to live. As this neoliberal version of feudalism infects the entire world, it displaces people from their communities, it forces industries to grow beyond demand, and it leaves us all with less time to enjoy our short lives. If your dream is to become a landlord, you need to get better fucking dreams. Okay? Now more than ever, it's becoming chic to be a landlord, right? There's house hacking, there's Airbnb, people are buying up multifamily properties in other cheaper states. We're told to diversify our portfolio and secure passive forms of income, to scrimp and hustle so we can retire early. Buying real estate and then renting it out has become the final solution to escaping the declining middle class in America. The more insecure we become in our material conditions, the less time we spend reflecting on how our actions impact other people. And this focus on individual well-being has led people to believe that becoming a landlord is the smartest choice, when in fact it's leading to our collective demise. The solution is not zero waste or minimalism or low buy, no buy or financial freedom or any other trend. We don't have to settle for the movie version of the apocalypse where society collapses quickly without revolution. We have to fight back before it's too late. On my last landlord video, I had a lot of landlords comment, and I could genuinely tell that some of them were good people trying to understand where I was coming from. And if you're a landlord, maybe now is a good time to sell your property to a nice family who is looking for a good price on a house. I mean, you probably already made some money off of this anyways, right? How much more money do you really need to make off of this investment of yours? Like, think about it. And sure, individual landlords aren't necessarily as bad as like the Bill Gates example, but it does add up, and it does mean that other people aren't able to secure a future for their family because of your investment. It really sucks. Like, seriously, ask yourself if you're okay with taking advantage of everyday people for your own personal gain. You're punching down. People hate landlords for a reason, okay? This isn't hate that comes from nowhere. We're not jealous or something. We hate you because we work hard and you take a huge portion of our money. If you're a renter, I know you don't have a lot of options. I mean, I wish we could do a general strike. That would be amazing. But I also know how scary that is for people who are already in vulnerable situations. I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit, so sorry. I don't have any perfect solutions, but even if this video just gets people talking about the link between land ownership and the high cost of renting and housing as a form of capital and climate change, I will feel accomplished. I want us all to fight back, and I would love your input in the comments, especially if it's a constructive solution to the seemingly impossible problem. And remember that when times get tough, austerity cannot be the prescription. No amount of austerity is going to fix this. Because as the climate crisis explodes into a climate apocalypse, we will still be clocking in at work. Because if we want shelter from the noxious fumes and the hailstorms, we will be expected to pay our rent. This video was brought to you by my patrons. Thank you so much for your continued support. If you would like to become a patron, it's just a $3 a month fan club, but of course there's no pressure to join, and given the nature of my content, I know that I attract a lot of people who might not be in the position to do so. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to subscribe. Enjoy the rest of your day. KELGORE out.